Okay, it's on.
Right, what we're going to do today is look at a dissection of a sheep's heart. A human heart is roughly about the same size as your fist. So depending on how big you are, obviously you've got bigger or smaller fists, and that corresponds roughly to how large your standard heart is. If we look at the exterior of the heart to start with, what we've got here is mainly ventricle. The atria have actually been chopped off the top by the butcher, and if we look down in the top we can see some of the main blood vessels and in from where the atria would be down into the ventricles. You'll notice all around the outside of the heart there is this white substance. This is actually fat. We can chop a little bit off, and it has a consistency very similar to dried chewing gum. Okay, so it's quite solid. Within the fat you can see lines running down the outside of the heart. These are the coronary arteries. It's what supplies the heart muscle with oxygen and glucose, and it's these that get blocked up and lead to coronary heart disease. Okay, so any fatty deposits build up in here, you get a blockage, and the muscle on the other side of the blockage will start to die. If we start to look at the interior of the heart, we'll go into the right side first. Now you should remember from looking at diagrams of the heart structure that the main difference between the right and the left hand side is the thickness of the ventricle wall. To test how thick the walls are, just pick up your heart, have a gentle sort of poke and prod around, and you'll notice that one side is quite considerably squishier than the other. That's going to be the right ventricle. So we'll start down at the bottom, making an incision away from yourself so you don't run the risk of cutting yourself with a scalpel, nearly to the top. Go in, and we can see we're starting to cut through the wall. Just nice small cuts. You should be able to slide your finger in underneath and just open it out slowly. One thing I would like to notice and have a look at to start with is the thickness of the ventricle wall, because when we go into the left hand side shortly we'll actually be able to compare the two. So it's quite thin, not a lot of muscle there. It's only required to pump the blood from the heart up to the lungs, so it doesn't need a great deal of pressure. If we cut the ventricle wall back, be careful not to remove the end of your finger. As we move up towards the top of the ventricle, you'll start to see, pulling away from the walls, the valve. This is the atrioventricular valve. On the right hand side of the heart, it's made up of 3 cusps. There's 1, 2, and the third one, is there. On this side it's called the tricuspid valve because it's made of those 3 different flaps. When the ventricle starts to contract, those flaps will close over and prevent blood flow back into the atrium. These structures, which actually link the septum of the heart down this middle and the wall of the ventricle, are called the